So very simply, what might make someone become or be a criminal? So I've given you a list here of some characteristics or experiences or features. What I would like to versus nurture, and then lastly, do you think criminals could be born or made? So you can either write this down, think to yourself, but for the first two, again, try and write these down and then have a go up considering what the last answer to the gold question might be. So you've got lack of education, friends, addiction, genetic predisposition, large head, small eyes, lack of intelligence, being inbred, poverty, greed, parents, your location growing up, lack of self control, a strong prominent jaw, big ears, and music influence, and lastly, domestic violence. So, already for the first one, lack of education, there's going to be a clear correlation between as to how that plays a role in someone becoming a criminal. Most criminals do or lack GCSEs or like most forms of education. There are some who, again, are quite qualified and live lives whereby they have university degrees and so on and so on. However, typically the general assumption and the general rule of thumb is that lack of education plays a direct role in someone most likely being a criminal, as they are less likely to work in a professional occupation, get a job, and may seek other means to make money. Friends, again, quite an important role with regards to your peers. Your peers influence you quite a bit. If you have a strong set of friends whereby they're very educational driven, or they're driven for whereby they want to achieve the best possible grades, or they want to succeed in the best way that they can. Again, these are the ones who may take you out of trouble, whereas you might have friends who have no real aspiration, shall we say, or don't really value education and will much rather commit crime or commit deviance from an early age, which can develop into crime. That can easily play a role. Addiction, again, if you are addicted to a drug or gambling or all sorts, that can lead to crime, most typically theft or burglary. Most people who are addicts tend to resort to petty crime to feed their addiction. Genetic predisposition, so you having a predisposing factor or something within you which is innate and making you more at risk of committing crime. So there are particular genes which we'll look at in the next lesson, which if you have this gene, you are more likely to be violent or a criminal. A large head, small eyes. Again, you might be thinking, why are these sort of factors here so far? As large head and small eyes shouldn't really have much of an influence, but you'll see with the atavistic form, it has quite an influence actually. Lack of intelligence. Again, we looked at the role of intelligence and low IQ in someone being a disorganized or organized offender, so we can make some inferences there. Being inbred again, so again, being a child of someone who has been intimate with someone who's closely kind of related to them, so either through sisters or even mother and son, daughter and father. Again, that is going to cause a imbalance in chromosomes and imbalance in DNA, which can lead to, again, disabilities, which again will affect cognitive function, understanding, and so on and so on. Poverty, naturally, poverty leads to crime in some scenarios. Sometimes it doesn't. Greed, and the rest you can sort of go through and sort of discuss, in your, through your peers or with family or friends. But typically, these are some of the main examples as to why people tend to become criminals. And it's not always the case, but sometimes these factors play a really, really big role. So again, Lombroso was someone who theorized that criminals could be identified by physiological markers, so again, physical characteristics, mainly on the face and the head. And there were other signs of criminality, which meant, people who had insensitivity to pain, tattoos, unemployment, use of slang or colloquial language was typically something to be recognizable if you were a criminal. If you had these sort of factors, you were essentially at risk or most likely to become a criminal. And these were some of the images generated from Lombroso, where he had, these individuals were actual criminals, but he would focus on their facial features and try and have some sort of correlation between what they looked like and why they were criminals. So, for example, here we have someone, large forehead, smaller ears, again, and you'll find that there are certain crimes which are associated with certain facial features. And here they are. So again, receding hairline, small and sloping foreheads, unusually short or tall in height, small head but a large face. If you look at again, long arms, sloping shoulders, thin neck, small or weak chin. So these are all examples of some of the characteristics Lombroso decided, or he felt comfortable in saying, that if you had these characteristics, you were arguably almost, or probably, a criminal, or there may be some sort of criminal predisposition. So have a quick look, make a note of a few of these examples. So what I would like you to do again is go through page 326, which is your using your psychology book, and make notes on which criminal features were associated with what crime, and again, what criticisms could you possibly find from this theory so far. Again, it's quite a strong theory in a sense where the claim that Lombroso is making is quite controversial. And if you were to bring out this theory in today's modern world, it would probably be laughed at. But again, he is someone who is a bit of a pioneer, someone who was, again, the founding father of criminology. So in the meantime, pause this video, read pages 326 and go through bronze, silver and gold for me, please. In your own time, what I would like you to do is go to www.morefaces.com and have a go at creating your own criminal. Something which can be done on a laptop or a phone, but it's something which you can do at home, and create your own sort of video or sort of image of what a criminal might look like using these sort of manipulating factors or manipulating parts of the application. It's good fun. Okay, now what I would sorry, it's got family shouting in the background. What I would like you to do is read page 327 and formulate a paragraph for each AO3 point. So I've given you an example of what one might look like. And one of the main controversial parts of Lombroso was that he was, in fact, accused of scientific racism. And what we see here is an example of a student's breakdown of that paragraph and as to how it plays, or how it sort of functions, as how it's been ordered in a way to really complement the student's answer. So if you have a look over here, Lombroso has been accused of scientific racism in his understanding of criminal behavior. Delisi identified a strong correlation between Lombroso's deemed criminal characteristics and the characteristics of those of African descent, meaning that adopting this theory potentially put innocent ethnic groups at risk of punishment and stigma. In addition, this lends favour to the highly controversial eugenics philosophy, which not only was adopted by the Nazis towards the disabled, but also Goldson, who advocated vasectomies and even murder of those who possessed these characteristics. So if you look at this paragraph and break it down, if we start from the back up and we see what Goldson argued. So Goldson advocated vasectomies. Vasectomy is a process whereby someone is rendered unable to have any children. And this was primarily based on the pure, simple fact that they had these characteristics which were deemed to be criminal. And again, if we look at Nazi Germany, the controversy with regard to Nazi Germany was not only their approach towards the Jews, but also towards the disabled or those who were mentally ill. What they would do is children who were disabled or the elderly who were disabled, there would be a big push for propaganda whereby the encouragement for euthanasia was sort of pushed towards them, where they again were deemed to be drains on the economy and drains on the people as a whole. And this sort of pushed, if you had these sort of characteristics, you were no longer valuable to society. And this is where the real ethical issues sort of lie with Lombroso's theory, is that it has very, very sinister ties and it has a very, very sinister link to atrocities in history. But it starts off well, because not only does it gives the main argument, the main point, and then it explains it by there being a correlation between criminal characteristics and characteristics of those who were from a particular ethnicity, and then it identifies the issue. So what I would like you to do in your own time, have a go at creating your own pure paragraphs. And in the next slides, what I am going to do is go through each one and mention certain points in which you can add based on the book in which you should be looking at. So pause the video and do what you need to do. So again, this is going to be the AO3 point, which you should have started off with. So like I said before, it's okay to take words from the book and sentences from the book, but try and make the words your own. But typically he is the father of criminology. So he was someone who pioneered the theory of understanding crime and understanding criminals and creating his own sort of criminal profiling. So credit has to be given, even though his theory is quite weak. So again, it started off the notion of criminal profiling, and it made a major contribution to the science of criminology. So again, what he would often do is study the facial structure of criminals after they're passed away or prior. But again, he still has contributed greatly and is someone who is quite recognized. So again, father of modern criminology is going to be the main keyword here for you. If you look at, again, scientific racism, we've mentioned it already. So your paragraph should be somewhat similar to this or similar to what was mentioned before, where again you've got issues of stereotypes, stigma, eugenics. But it's important that you mention here ethical issues, where you start to mention the issues and debate sort of sides, where you really, really buff up your paragraphs. Oh. 1 second, how do you go back? Okay, so contradictory evidence. Now, so Charles Goring, like Lombroso, set out to establish whether there were any physical or mental abnormalities among criminal classes. And after conducting a comparison between 3,000 criminals and 3,000 non-criminals, he concluded that there was no evidence that offenders are a distinct group with unusual facial and cranial characteristics. So already, much larger sample, so 6,000 in total, and it totally contradicts and it goes against the foundation of what Lombroso argued. And bear in mind, looking at the time and the date, it's more relative to today, and it's more of a reasonable or understandable approach. Now, this argument here, which refutes Lombroso's view of what a criminal is and what they could be, it opened up so many more opportunities to have a better understanding. So again, what Lombroso's argument was, it was quite deterministic, and it reduced crime just down to someone's facial features. And this again was evidence of that. Poor control. So again, the lack of control meant that we do not know, or we don't know if the characteristics were unique to criminals or a similar number might have been found in any population. There was also no control for the fact that some of the criminals had other psychological disorders, and the atavistic characteristics might have been related to such disorders. So again, it's very hard to infer there being a direct correlation or a direct link between the characteristics he's deemed to be criminal and actually being a criminal. Lastly, causation, which again is going to be an issue. So Richard Kurtzberg et al. 1978 found that offenders in the USA given facial cosmetic surgery tended to do better on release from prison than those who had not had the surgery. Another environmental influence might have been peer group. It is possible that a person turns to crime for acceptance into a group, as opposed to just being based on features. So again, causation is an issue. You can't reduce crime purely down to someone's facial features or their cranial differences. There are going to be external factors which play a role. There will be genetics, most definitely, but not to the degree in which Lombroso has mentioned. And there's no way to attribute, or there's no way to suggest that someone, if they looked at a certain way, is going to be a criminal or more likely to be a criminal. So again, there are 3 or 4 AO3 points here. Now, it's quite easy for you to be able to implement or link these together into 3 main solid paragraphs. Now, bear in mind, again, when it comes to 16-mark questions, which is what the focus is going to be on, you only really need 3 to 4. And if you have 3 solid, strong ones where you've got issues and debates elements there, you've got AO3 mixed with other AO3 points, it's going to really buff up your answer. So again, it's more about quality as opposed to quantity. And if you have any questions with regards to the atavistic form, then either send me a message or show my homework. But for now, this will be the end of the lesson. I will probably try and make these a bit more different for next time, and I'll try and make them a bit user friendly. Alright, thank you for watching.